Unconditional love doesn't really exist. Let me explain that. I'm not just someone who thinks that it doesn't exist. I actually don't want to believe that unconditional love exists. I'm actually in the camp of people that think that if unconditional love existed, it would be a terrible thing. And the reason I say that is because the whole point of an intimate relationship is spending your life with someone that you have an unbelievable connection with and someone who really tries for you, a teammate. That to me is, I mean, if you really want my idea of a relationship is teamwork. It's two people that look after each other. It's two people that nurture each other. It's two people that are there for each other. It's a team. It's the best team in the world. It's an unstoppable team. It's two people that can count on each other every day. To me, that doesn't fit with the idea of unconditional love. Unconditional love appears to suggest that no matter what someone does to you, you'll still love them. You'll still be in that same place with them. You'll still be committed to them. I don't know many relationships I've ever heard of like that. I challenge you to name one. I challenge you to name a relationship where the love was absolutely 100% unconditional, where no matter what those two people did to each other, they stayed together. And there are two ways I'd look at this. Firstly, if someone leaves, some people say, well, I left the person because I couldn't be with them, but I still love them. Well, okay, but it's kind of a conditional love because you left them. Right? You might still love them underneath, but you didn't love them enough to stay because they weren't treating you right. They weren't doing the right things. If someone cheated on you every day for the rest of your life, could you unconditionally love them? Would you still be there? I don't think so. I don't think unconditional love in that sense seems like this awful prison that no matter what someone does to you, you still have to remain there. You know, if unconditional love fades away quite quickly when you talk to someone about an abusive marriage. You know, if the man was abusive towards the woman, would you expect her to unconditionally love him? No. But what if she said, I unconditionally love you? It would quite quickly turn from something romantic into this horrible masochistic tendency to stay in something that was truly harmful. See, to me, unconditional love is an extremely dangerous concept. It makes people feel guilty in situations where they shouldn't feel guilty, where they should feel entitled to leave, where they should feel entitled to say, you know what, you don't care about me, you don't do enough for me, you're not trying in this relationship anymore, I can't be here. It makes people feel bad for leaving because they feel like the real notion of romance is unconditional love. I don't believe that's romantic.
Now, I first saw this video about 6 months ago, and I quickly dismissed it as the rantings of a young man who really doesn't know the first thing about love. In fact, I don't know that I even watched the entire clip, and this is only half of a much longer clip. But I stumbled across this video again about a week and a half ago, and I learned that Matthew Hussey is the best-selling author of a book called Get the Guy. He's also the resident love expert on the Today Show. He has a very popular column in Cosmopolitan. He's got a couple million followers on YouTube, and he is popularly known as the International Love Guru, which was actually my title before he snaked it from me. But I'm not mad at him. Anyway, so because of some of the credibility there, I decided to give him a chance and listen to what it was that he had to say. And while I don't know that I completely agree with everything that he says, he sure got me thinking. He challenged us in that video to name a relationship where the love was absolutely 100% unconditional. Well, I immediately thought of my lovely wife and the unconditional love that I believe I've experienced from her these last 18 years or so that we've been married. I mean, she accepted me in spite of all my emotional, psychological, relational baggage. She loves and has loved the 3 children that I came into our marriage with, treated them like they are her own. When I think of unconditional love, I think of Charlene. But as I thought a little bit about it, I remembered something that Charlene has always said that is very much a condition that I have to maintain in order for our relationship to remain intact. And I just confirmed with her this week that it's still a condition that I must meet. And it is this. My sweet wife has told me on multiple occasions that if I ever cheat on her, she would cut me, and that our marriage would swiftly be over. And I'm sure she only means that hypothetically. Anyway, so now, I am more than happy to meet that condition, but it is a condition no less. And so I said, okay, maybe that's not the idea there. So I thought about the love and the relationship that exists between a parent and their child. Surely that is an example of unconditional love, huh? Now, I want to say, though, just in my own experience, I want to believe that I have demonstrated unconditional love and acceptance toward my kids. At least that has always been my heart's desire. But as I look back, I did that this week. I looked back, and I can remember a couple of times where my kids were so angry with me, and my sweet son is sitting there next to my bride, so angry with me that they refused to talk to me for like a couple of weeks. And so I fought fire with fire. I said, fine, you don't want to talk to me? I'm not going to talk to you either. And so there we are, father and child in two separate corners of the house. Yeah. And, you know, it's maybe not the most mature response, but I'm being honest with you, that was my response. When expectations weren't met on both sides, the result was a temporary separation between parent and child. Maybe you are a better parent than I am, and you really believe that you have loved your children without conditions. Okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you have. But I think that as much as the rest of us who live in reality, as much as the rest of us might want to see ourselves as that shining example of someone who has demonstrated perfect, unconditional parental love, we all fall short. I think, in fact, I know, more often than not, maybe without knowing it, we are putting expectations on our kids that at least sometimes make them feel like they are loved conditionally. There's this book that was written by a political columnist. His name is Ron Fournier, who wrote for The Atlantic, or still writes for The Atlantic. He wrote a book about his son Tyler, who has Asperger's syndrome, which is a condition that is on the autism spectrum. The book is called Love That Boy: What Two Presidents, 8 Road Trips, and My Son Taught Me About a Parent's Expectations. This book is all about Ron's journey to accept his son as he is, without conditions. I want to read you just a portion of the first chapter, which you can read online for free at his website, because I believe that it communicates a very powerful message for any of us who desire to love our kids without conditions. Okay, now just to give you a little context here for what I'm about to read, you have to picture the scene. Ron and his son Tyler are at the White House. This is a common occurrence apparently for Ron, but they're at the White House, and they're in line to meet President Obama. And in this moment, Ron is feeling anxiety because he's concerned that his son Tyler may act out like he is so often prone to do. So this is what it says. Ron says, "I'm not just embarrassed about Tyler's manners. I'm embarrassed about being embarrassed. After all, this kid would do anything to please me. I expect him to behave. He does. I expect him to respect his ma. He does. I love sports. He hates them, but he plays them for me. Guilt and helplessness gnaw at any parent. Most deeply for a father like me whose expectations exceed his common sense." Okay, well, Tyler and I, we inch toward the green room, and he's practicing his handshake and his hello. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. President." When the couple in front of us steps forward for their picture, my teenager with sky blue eyes and a soft heart looks up at me and he says, "I hope I don't let you down, Dad." Yeah. What kind of father raises a son to worry about embarrassing his dad? I want to tell Tyler not to worry. that he'd never let me down, that there's nothing wrong with being different, that I actually am proud of what makes him special. But we're next in line to meet the President of the United States, and all I can think about is the real possibility that Tyler might embarrass himself, or God forbid, me. Have you ever felt that way? Worried that your child's behavior, or the fact that maybe they are different, that it might be a poor reflection on you, that it might embarrass you? You know, I've worked very hard to make sure that my kids didn't live with that head trip that comes with being the child of a pastor. I don't want to mess up because I'll make my dad look bad. I worked hard to do that. I don't know that I have always done a good job. Do you want to hear how the story ends, or do you want to read it for yourself online? Okay. Nobody wants to hear it. Okay, so let me go on with the scripture. Oh, you did? Okay, I just wasn't sure. I didn't hear you. Church mice. All right. Here's how the story ends. So it's now our turn, Ron says. The president shakes my hand while Tyler approaches Mrs. Obama. Still playing hoops, the president asks me, recalling the pickup game that we played during his presidential campaign. Yes, sir, I reply as we pose stiffly for pictures. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Mrs. Obama gently brush Tyler's bangs from his eyes and lean in for a hug. And I worry for a moment that Tyler's going to pull away because he's not comfortable with being touched, especially by strangers. But he embraces the First Lady, wishes her a Merry Christmas, and then shuffles to his left to look her husband squarely in the eye and shake his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. President. And my stomach clenches as I realize the problem here isn't my son. It's not even autism. It's me. I think I'm tired because I feel emotional here. That's a very emotional thing. If we're truly honest with ourselves, and I'm talking like gut level honest, like Ron here is being with us, we'd have to admit that we can all tend to love the people in our lives, even the ones who are closest to us, sometimes even our kids, with certain expectations and conditions that can often be burdensome. Raising kids who, like Tyler, live with the fear of letting us down. Some of us grew up under parents like that. Perfectionists who made us feel bad when we messed up, and now it carries on to our own children. The reality is that we can often, and not always, but often, view our relationships just the way that this love guru defines them in that video. Someone who really tries for you. Two people who work hard to make each other happy. He goes on to say later on in the video that the key to a relationship is to never stop trying to impress your partner. Okay, well, what happens when we feel like our partners stop trying? What happens when they no longer impress us? We're not impressed with the way they talk or the way they treat us. We're not impressed by the way they look, by their physical appearance. What happens when they no longer measure up to our expectations? Well, you know what? You know what happens? We withdraw from those people. We ignore them. We give them the silent treatment. We manipulate them, or try to manipulate them into changing for us. We punish them. Say, oh, shoot, if you're not going to give me what I want, I'm not going to give you what you want. And I know exactly what you want. Okay, now hopefully, in a healthy relationship, we learn how to effectively communicate with people. And we increasingly extend patience and grace to those who we feel aren't meeting our needs or our expectations. And hopefully, we grow in our ability to love unconditionally. But in this life, the hard truth that I'm trying to communicate here, and that I believe we have to recognize, that unconditional love and acceptance is incredibly hard to find in this world. Many people spend their whole lives trying to find someone who will love them unconditionally and without expectations. And in many cases, those of us who are unable to find it, manufacture it. We get the love and the validation and the acceptance that we need one way or another, even if it comes by way of something or someone that is destructive. We all know people, some of us have been one, who does incredibly dumb things in an attempt to gain the love and the acceptance and the approval of others. And that's because to be loved by someone unconditionally, just as we are, without us feeling the pressure of having to earn their love or having to do something or change something about ourselves in order to maintain a person's love or affection. That's what every single one of us long for at the deepest level of our being. And it reminds me of the chorus of a popular Christian song by a woman by the name of J.J. Heller. It's called "Who Will Love Me for Me?" And she speaks about a woman, for example, in one of the verses whose husband left her. And so she goes to the gym every day, wondering if she was thinner, maybe he would have stayed. And in the chorus she says, "Who will love me for me? Not for what I have done or what I will become. Who will love me for me?" Well, the beautiful, life-changing answer to that question is Jesus. Amen. I want to read to you the words of Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 8 that communicate how he loves us unconditionally when we don't even deserve it. When we were utterly helpless, incapable of doing anything to earn his love, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people wouldn't be willing to die for an upright person, though maybe someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners, when we were at our worst, when we were still in the midst of our rebellion, and when we didn't care anything about him, when we were not really trying for him. Jesus demonstrated his love by laying down his life for us. His love is unconditional. In fact, the Apostle Paul makes it very clear that God's love is not something that we're even capable of earning. It was at the point where we were utterly helpless that Jesus died for us. Not when we started behaving right, again, while we were still sinners, or when we started acting especially good. No, he loved us when we were at our worst, when we were at our most unattractive. While we were still sinners, God expressed his love toward us without conditions. For it says in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, it is by grace that you have been saved. Grace. You've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It's the gift of God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things that we've done. So none of us can boast about it. Now, I did read a number of commentaries this week where folks were arguing that God's love is conditional because they say it requires faith for us to receive it. In other words, faith, they say, is the condition that God places on his love for us. See, I think that what they're failing to do, that we need to make a distinction between unconditional love and unconditional relationship. This is a deep question that you might have to wrestle through at home with your spouse or something. I mean, can you love someone and not be with them? I really love them, but I can't be with them. It's an interesting question. And when you put it in those terms, then yeah, I suppose that faith is a condition that must be met in order for us to experience the benefits that come with being in a relationship with God. But it's the easiest condition that a person can meet. I'm going to give you an illustration of this. Ella, can you come up here, my dear, on the stage? Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything to embarrass you. Come on up here. I'm going to show you something. Make it snappy, sister. Just kidding. $20 here. I'm going to put your name on it, my dear. ELLA. I didn't have to work very hard for this $20, but I did earn it. It's something that I worked for. I think I did magic tricks to earn it. But this has Ella's name all over it. I want to give it. She doesn't have to earn it. I want to give it to her freely. It is hers. Again, it has her name on it. She just has to believe that I'm truly offering it to her for free. She doesn't have to do anything. She doesn't have to do a backflip. And she's a really great singer. She doesn't have to sing to earn it. It's hers. You hear what I'm saying? It's already hers. It has her name on it. Given to her freely. She would just have to believe me enough to take it. And then it would be hers. I don't want to have to beg her. I mean, I'm telling her plainly. But until she actually does something on her part, which is a simple condition, all you have to do, is reach out and it is yours. And some people need so much convincing to believe it. Some people practically have to have it dropped in their life. Wow, I mean, oh my gosh, it's hers. Good job. So it's yours. Good job. Don't spend it all in one place. My goodness. And so it is with God. He's saying, take it. Just take it. I love you. I've told you. I've demonstrated it for you on the cross. I love you. Take it. Receive it. All we have to do, is it's the most simple condition that anybody could ever meet. See, we only experience the benefits of God's love, the relational part, when we put our faith in the fact that we are unconditionally loved by Him in spite of our shortcomings and our failings and our sin. God will never, ever abandon you or walk away from you. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people believe that He does. They believe that God can't be in the presence of sin. And so because of that, when we do sin, which they never really say how much you have to sin in order for this to happen, but they would say that when we do sin, God withdraws his presence from us and He turns away, in disgust until we get right again. And then He comes back. I've spoken of this as being a swivel chair. God, He's looking toward you. You're sinning again, and He's just constantly back and forth. I read a number of commentaries from Bible teachers, popular ones, who I'm not going to quote, but they communicate this message in their sermons. And one of the scriptures that so pardon me, because I'm just going to have a little aside here. But I think this is important because maybe some of you have come to believe this. One of the scriptures that they often go to in order to defend this position, that God withdraws His presence from you when you sin. One of the scriptures they use is Matthew chapter 27, verse 46, where Jesus, while He's dying on a cross, He says these words, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me, essentially? And they believe that since God can't be in the presence of sin, that He had to abandon, He had to forsake Jesus, because Jesus, it says, became sin for us. And so God turned away from His Son as He died there on the cross. Well, I don't believe that's true, because it contradicts other scriptures that explicitly say that God will never forsake us. For example, because I'll show you through the scriptures here. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6 say this. God has said, and God is not a liar, God has said, never will I leave you. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. And so we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, so I will have no fear. What can mere mortals do to me? Say that with confidence. Now, the writer of Hebrews said that, and he's quoting something from Deuteronomy. This is 31 verse 6, where it says this, Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or terrified because of them, whoever they are in your life right now. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. So is God a liar? No, he's not. And are we supposed to believe that God somehow went against his own word by forsaking the Son that he loved so much? I don't think so. Something's wrong on our side. There's an interpretation issue here that we need to work through. God is not a liar. And in fact, Jesus was even confident that his Father would never forsake him. His friends would, but Jesus knew that his Father never would. He says this in the Garden of Gethsemane to his disciples. A time is coming, and in fact, now has come, he said, when you will be scattered, each to his own home. You will leave me all alone. The love of his friends at that point was very conditional. When the going got tough, they bounced. I've been there. He says, you will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. Okay, so then why did Jesus seem to say that God had forsaken him? Something very important, very profound is happening here. But before I tell you what that is, okay, if I say stop, collaborate, and listen, yeah, and if you didn't say it out loud, you were thinking in your head, many of you, I don't know how many, maybe not this crowd, maybe if I said, blame it all on my roots. Yeah, okay, so maybe I don't know which crowd's here this morning. Essentially, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, if I say stop, I'm referring to a popular rap song that is ingrained in the deep fiber of our brains from the 80s. So when I spoke out the first 4 words of that song, you could hear Jason. If I say stop, collaborate, and listen, ICE is back with the brand new invention. Okay, so your minds fill in all the rest by me just saying the first verse. What is the point of that, Rudy? You better have a point. Okay, that is what Jesus is doing here. Only he's not quoting Vanilla Ice. He is stating the first verse of a very popular psalm that would have been ingrained in the fibers of the brains of those people who stood there at the foot of the cross. They are the exact words that we find in an incredibly accurate prophetic psalm that spoke about the death of Christ 900 years before it even happened. It's incredible. It's Psalm chapter 22, verse 1, and it's Psalm chapter 22, verse 1 opens with these familiar words where it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? As Jesus recites this first line of Psalm 22, those who are familiar with it know that it's talking about the Messiah and what he'd have to go through in order to fulfill the plan of salvation. They would remember that it says, my enemies surround me like a pack of dogs. A pack of villains encircles me. And listen to this. 900 years before it happened, when crucifixion didn't even exist yet, they pierce my hands and feet, it says in verse 17. They would see verse 18. They would remember verse 18. They divide my clothes among them and they cast lots for my garment. That was fulfilled in Matthew chapter 27. Verse 35 where it says, when they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. I won't continue to belabor the point, but we can see, hopefully you can see, how Psalm 22 was being fulfilled by Jesus there on the cross, but the people who were actually there when it was happening, they couldn't see it. In fact, they were mocking him, saying, man, if you're the Son of God, why aren't you coming off the cross? If you're the Messiah, save yourself. They mocked him. They couldn't see. And so Jesus was trying with the very little strength that he could muster just to say the first words, trusting that they would fill in the rest. He was trying to get them to remember so that they could see that what he was doing was intentional. And not only that was it intentional, it was a fulfillment of the words of that psalm right there before their very eyes. And as he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? They would have also remembered the comforting words of verse 24 that comes just a little bit later, where it says, he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. God didn't forsake him. It had nothing to do with that. God never turned his back on his son at the point when he needed him the most. And because of that, you can be confident that he will never leave or forsake you either, no matter what. God is not like a critical parent who puts unreasonable expectations on his kids. He's not like the fickle lover, as I said, who withholds love from you when you don't measure up. You get the $20, then you just leave. That's messed up. He's taking too long. I'm almost done. Darn kids. Get out of here. I'm just kidding. Oh, man. My point is that God's love for us is unconditional, and we don't have to do anything to earn it. Jesus has done everything for us. He met all of God's expectations on our behalf. It's interesting, and I'm closing with this. In the Gospel of John, we're told that the very last words that Jesus spoke, with his last breath, Jesus said, "It is finished." Jesus did everything necessary to remove the barrier that stood between us and our Father so that we could experience a relationship with him. Interestingly, the last words of Psalm 22 are exactly the same. They will tell people yet to be born about his righteousness, that he has finished it. Wow, those are the closing words of the Psalm. Like, Jesus, that gives me he's so incredible. Wow, thank you, Jesus. So be assured, you can't add to what Jesus has done. God has made his love freely available to anyone just willing to believe him for it. Faith is all it takes for salvation. It's by grace. And so for those who have never heard those words or experienced unconditional love, know that God loves you just the way you are, no matter what. Matthew Hussey was talking about, people who don't measure up and they're not doing what it is that they're not fulfilling your needs and they're not trying hard enough, man. In spite of our lack of trying, in the midst of our failure, God is extending his love and mercy toward you. I want to just close with this psalm. It's a prayer. It's in the book of Ephesians, chapter 3. I read it at a wedding last night. It's one of my favorites. I always love to read it at weddings. But this is God's heart, my prayer for you and God's heart for you. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, that God will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him, and your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide and how long and how high and how deep his love is. And may you experience the love of Christ, though it's really too great to understand fully. But as you do, then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God.